What is up, Steelers Nation? Thank you so much for jumping on to another episode of All Steelers Talk. I'm Noah Strackbine coming to you back in the 412. We are at home base once again, and it feels great to be here in the city of Pittsburgh talking about, Pittsburgh Steelers quarterbacks, Pittsburgh Steelers draft plans, and really not the same topic of conversation that we have been on top of and have tried so hard to stay patient with for now 5 weeks. Aaron Rodgers week 5 is upon us, but we're diving into Pittsburgh Steelers draft plans, how the NFL has possibly hinted at the Steelers and many other teams having first round grades on guys that we did not think many in the NFL did have first round grades on. Meanwhile, the Pittsburgh Steelers are showing their hand with one quarterback, and rumor has it that they are on a short list with another quarterback. And is there a surprise position that the Pittsburgh Steelers could be identifying as a first round pick in this year's NFL draft? We're going to dive into it. Plus, we're going to answer all of your questions. So make sure you're tossing them in the chat throughout the show. Shout out to our super chatters. I'm obviously going to get to you guys first, and then shout out to our members. For those of you who have not yet, make sure to call into our call-in show for Wednesday morning if you are a member. With that said, let's talk Pittsburgh Steelers 2025 NFL draft and how the black and gold and their plans for the 21st pick in the NFL draft, becoming a little clearer as we sit here today. We will start with what happened over the weekend, which is the Pittsburgh Steelers not showing up to Colorado's Pro Day. And everybody will say that's a non-story. Nobody cares. It's a pretty big story because the Pittsburgh Steelers have sent at least somebody to almost everyone's Pro Day. And in this situation, they sent Kelvin Fisher, who's just their West Coast scout. And you want to know who the only picture of him talking to at Colorado's Pro Day is? Well, it's Shedeur Sanders, Deion Sanders' other son, who's expected to be a late round safety if he is drafted at all, a defensive back who had a pretty good 40, but is not a guy that moves the needle for the Pittsburgh Steelers or really any other team in the NFL. Well, the Pittsburgh Steelers have some interest, I guess, in that side of the family, but probably not the other. We talked on Friday about how the Pittsburgh Steelers, according to Adam Schefter, have one quarterback in mind when it comes to the 21st pick in the NFL draft, and that was Shedeur Sanders. Why? Because he was the only guy that had first-round talent and was guaranteed to be a first-round pick, but if he slid, how far would he have to slide before the Pittsburgh Steelers made a move to go get him? I shut a lot of that down. I think a lot of you guys shut a lot of that down and said, yeah, I get it. I understand the reasoning in what Schefter is saying, but at the end of the day, Shedeur Sanders doesn't make a ton of sense for the Pittsburgh Steelers because he comes with outside noise that maybe the Steelers are not looking to have. And I think the Aaron Rodgers situation is bringing up a lot when it comes to the Pittsburgh Steelers, realizing that, every time they take a step forward, they take 2 steps back in the realm of drama and sagas and situations that continue to make negative headlines. Sanders, from what I've been told, is a name that could be on the Steelers board that they are not going to remove, just like they didn't remove Russell Wilson, no matter how long they were willing to wait, how many other options had to fall off the board before Russell Wilson actually became an option for the Pittsburgh Steelers. When it comes to Shedeur Sanders, it's almost the same boat. The Steelers would look at it and say, okay, the 21st pick is upon us. Shedeur Sanders is here. Kenneth Grant is gone. Walter Nolan is gone. Derek Harmon is gone. Emeka Ibuka, Matthew Golden, Omarion Hampton, Ashton Genty, Gray Zabel's off the board for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Malachi Sparks, Nicky Imuare, all of them gone. And the Steelers are sitting there going, all right, Shedeur Sanders is the pick. This looks like the guy that's going to potentially be our franchise quarterback for the next X amount of years. That is most likely what would need to happen for Shedeur Sanders and the Pittsburgh Steelers. And while a lot of people say, hey, second best quarterback in the NFL draft, I think the Pittsburgh Steelers look at it and say, second best quarterback in the NFL draft in a bad draft class where there are other players with just as much upside. not a ton. And I don't think anybody outside of Cam Ward really has that massive upside. Jalen Milroe does, and we're going to talk about him in a second, but a different realm, a different situation here for the Pittsburgh Steelers. And at quarterback, Shedeur Sanders is a guy that, okay, yeah, pocket passer, has a great arm, can make all the throws, is accurate, but he said it himself. He brings cameras everywhere he goes. And his father brings cameras everywhere that they go. And you don't know if you want that if you're the Pittsburgh Steelers. I doubt that they do. I think Dion made a short list of teams that he'd welcome Shedeur Sanders to. The Pittsburgh Steelers were not on that list. And I think they, amongst other teams, looked at it and said, all right, sounds good. Maybe we'll feel the same way about Shedeur Sanders. I don't believe the Pittsburgh Steelers are very high on Shedeur. I don't. I think that they obviously recognize the talent. Everybody does. But this just kind of shows that, well, they don't really view him as the Jackson Dart, as the Tyler Shuck, they didn't go to Cam Ward's pro day, but it's more so, this is not a guy that we're going to involve ourselves heavily with. If we get lucky and a lot of other things happen, there's a conversation to be had. But right here, right now, I don't think Shedeur Sanders is that guy. Obviously, Adam Schefter does. We talked about it on Friday. The Pittsburgh Steelers, along with many of us, have sat down and said, you know what, we're going to show our hands a little bit, and we're going to say Shedeur isn't on our list, and everybody should start paying attention. At the same time, according to NFL Network's Ian Rappaport, the Pittsburgh Steelers are on a short list with a lot of interest in another quarterback in the first round, a guy that a lot of people are pounding the drum for. A lot of people are sitting around saying, okay, here we go. This is a name some are on board with, some are not. I have argued against heavily during this draft cycle or scouting cycle, but I could be wrong. And while I sit here with some opinions, it doesn't mean that the Pittsburgh Steelers are listening. In fact, the Pittsburgh Steelers rarely listen to Noah Strackbein or anybody else, no matter how hard I try to tell them that I know what I'm talking about once every 100th time. And maybe they should listen every now and then. According to Ian Rappaport, quote, the Steelers are among the teams who have spent a lot of time with Jackson Dart. The Saints have also spent a ton of time with him. The Giants and Browns, those are the quarterback teams. Those are the teams who would consider him. The Pittsburgh Steelers on a short list for Jackson Dart, the Ole Miss quarterback that has a first-round grade. And I think our next topic of conversation, which will be who got invited to the NFL draft, kind of hints that Jackson Dart is much higher on the board than we anticipate, than a lot of people think, that maybe quarterbacks are going to come hot and heavy when the first round begins. And Jackson Dart is the name to watch for the Pittsburgh Steelers. And again, I'm not super high on what Jackson Dart brings. I think he's got a good arm, but I think he played in a very easy offense. I think that he's athletic, but there's nothing about that athleticism that says he is top tier athlete. I mean, it's good. Don't get me wrong, but it's not Jalen Milroe. It's not Cam Ward. I don't think there is another name in this draft that meets that criteria, to be quite honest with you, but I'm not very high on the quarterback class in this NFL draft as a whole. But Jackson Dart is a guy that the Pittsburgh Steelers are spending a ton of time with. That comes after they invited him to a pre-draft visit where he showed up at UPMC Rooney Sports Complex. I had to send somebody down there to confirm that it was real because I was in good old Fort Lauderdale, was not expecting Jackson Dart to be in the building on Friday afternoon. He was. Look, the Steelers have stayed consistent with Jackson Dart, and you have to take that into consideration. You have to look at that realistically and say, there's got to be something there if the Pittsburgh Steelers are spending this much time with a prospect. If they are this into Jackson Dart, maybe it's time for us to listen. If they are on a short list, maybe it's time for us to listen. Now, I don't expect the Cleveland Browns to draft a quarterback before the Pittsburgh Steelers. I don't expect the New York Giants to draft a quarterback before the Pittsburgh Steelers. I think both of them are going to look at other positions and say this draft class is too strong up front for us to take a shot at quarterback. We have backup plans. Those backup plans are not very good. Shout out former Steelers Kenny Pickett and Russell Wilson, but they're backup plans. And the teams are going to look at that. The New Orleans Saints, I think are a threat for the Steelers and any other team looking at Jackson Dart, because they are going to want a quarterback. Derek Carr is on the last year of a deal that nobody expected him to actually be a part of, which means that next year, chances are he's not in New Orleans. They're going to need another quarterback. They're looking young. Spencer Rattler is not it, but they'll continue to develop him. Jackson Dart feels like a name that in the middle of the first round there makes a lot of sense, where the value starts to reach the upside, where you're looking at it going, all right, look at a lot of these guys are off the board. A lot of these big superstars are no longer here, and we have other positions of need, but paying a quarterback next year is not something that we can do. And now we have Kellen Moore as a head coach who develops quarterbacks, who does a really good job developing quarterbacks. So we're going to take a shot on a guy like Jackson Dart and hope that our offense is good enough to make it easy on a first-round quarterback in a year, because this year Derek Carr is our starting quarterback, and that's not going to change. I could see the New Orleans Saints being a challenge for the Pittsburgh Steelers. But if he gets past New Orleans, the Steelers are the next ones on the clock that would even consider a Jackson Dart. And I don't know if they're all in on him. I don't know if it's a smokescreen. I wouldn't rule out a smokescreen. I really, truly would not. I mean, the Steelers were all in on Malik Willis before they drafted Kenny Pickett. And don't get me wrong, that was not they had interest in Malik Willis. They had a ton of interest in Malik Willis, but they went with Kenny Pickett. And in this draft, maybe they have a ton of interest in Jackson Dart, and they go with Jalen Milroe, who got invited to the NFL draft, which was shocking. According to the Athletics' Dane Brugler, him and Matthew Golden will both be at the green room or in the green room during the 2025 NFL draft. And I'm sorry, but there is nothing in my head that tells me that Jalen Milroe is going to be a first-round pick. But now that he's invited, you got to start thinking that the NFL knows something we don't, that these players don't just get picked randomly. Nobody's just like, all right, we'll take 5 names out of a hat and we'll call them and see if they want to show up. That's not how this works. They take the guys that they believe, they invite the guys that they believe are going to be first-round picks. And quarterback is the most flashy position. So they're going to invite quarterbacks. Jalen Milroe, in my eyes, and I think in a lot of other eyes, is not a first-round pick. But the NFL, again, knows something that we don't. And what it most likely means is that there are teams who have a first-round grade on Jalen Milroe, who look at Jalen Milroe and say, this guy is going to go in the first 32 picks of the draft. The Pittsburgh Steelers, I think, are an interesting team to watch in this situation. Why? Because if it falls to where Jackson Dart and Jalen Milroe are standing in front of the Pittsburgh Steelers and they're thinking quarterback, which I'm not saying that they're going to. I'm not saying that I would either. I do not believe wholeheartedly that I would pick a quarterback in the first round of this NFL draft. I would not. I think the 4th round is where I'm looking quarterback if I'm the Pittsburgh Steelers, because I now am fully convinced Jalen Milroe is not going to be there in the 3rd round. I don't see a quarterback in the first 3 rounds that is worth taking, where you are determined and, set in stone, this guy's going to be your guy. I think that is a massive risk to be taking. But the Pittsburgh Steelers and many other teams make their grades and talk to the NFL, and then the NFL, they send those invites. And if the Steelers find themselves, just to backtrack here, with Jackson Dart and Jalen Milroe at 21, I don't think anybody could sit here and say that it is guaranteed that in the Steelers' eyes, not ours, in the Steelers' eyes, which we do not agree with most times, but in the Steelers' eyes, they would not go with Jalen Milroe. You can go back to Mike Tomlin's final press conference of the 2024 season. It was January. I was sitting right there. Alan Saunders asks about the finding a quarterback early, and if you believe that you need to find a quarterback early to be successful in the NFL. And Mike Tomlin's response is that Lamar Jackson and Jalen Hurts were not early picks in the NFL draft. You want to know who's being compared to both Jalen Hurts and Lamar Jackson? Jalen Milroe. You want to know who Mike Tomlin loves to just cling himself to? those big flashy names with a ton of athleticism at the position that he says he must target. The Steelers love to do that. Do I think it's the right move? No. Nobody should. Nobody should be sitting around saying the Pittsburgh Steelers need to glue themselves to quarterback because they need to go find it. Because you want to know what that leads to? That leads to Artie Burns at corner. That leads to Terrell Edmonds at safety. That leads to, Ziggy Hood in a much lesser degree, but Ziggy Hood at defensive end, defensive tackle. That leads to guys that the Pittsburgh Steelers say, we aren't looking best player available. We're looking at quarterbacks. We're looking at this position. It leads to Kenny Pickett. And the Steelers should not be doing that. They should not, by no means, be sitting around saying, okay, let's go get a quarterback. We have to go get our quarterback. Our quarterback is Jalen Milroe. But if they're both there, it would not surprise me at all if the Pittsburgh Steelers say, okay, we're in this for the long haul. We need a guy that's got a ton of upside. You want to know who's got the most upside outside of Cam Ward in the entire NFL draft at the quarterback position? Jalen Milroe. You want to know who's got the worst floor of any quarterback in the NFL draft? Jalen Milroe. Both things are true. The Pittsburgh Steelers might only be blinded by the floor and say, look at that upside. Look at the athleticism on that guy. We still believe we're going to get Aaron Rodgers, so he's our quarterback this year. Jalen Milroe gets to sit there, and he's the guy next year. He gets to learn from Aaron Rodgers. Again, I don't agree with the situation, but I could see it happening. The Pittsburgh Steelers showed their hand that they were real interested in this guy, taking him out to dinner. You don't overlook the dinner. The Steelers are known to be taking the guys that they want to draft out to dinner. They took Broderick Jones out to dinner the year before he was ever drafted. That's how much they do this. They took him out to dinner. They showed up at his pro day. They talked to him at the Senior Bowl. They talked to him at the Combine. We still got a month before top 30 visits are over, and it's a weird draft cycle to where guys like Tyler Warren only have 130 visit. So maybe guys just don't have a 30 visit. Maybe the teams are weird on this. Maybe prospects are getting weird on this. I don't know. Maybe the Steelers don't want to show their hands too much, and they're bringing in Jackson Dart as a smokescreen to say, Saints, go get that guy because we're going to take Jalen Milroe. Maybe the NFL believes that Jalen Milroe has surpassed a name like Tyler Shuck. I don't know. I don't trust mock drafts. They're never that big to me. What I do trust most times are the NFL draft invites, because the NFL talks directly to these teams to say, hey, who's got first-round grades on who? Okay, we're going to invite all these guys. Could be the Steelers hitting the panic button, which is the other side of this situation. You don't want the Steelers to hit the panic button and say, oh, man, he's here. That means we got to draft him. Oh, what do we do? I don't know. I think it's very, I don't want to say alarming yet. It's early to say alarming, but something to watch. For sure, something to watch with Jalen Milroe being at the NFL draft and the Steelers having a heavy interest in Jackson Dart and Jalen Milroe, shutting down the Shedeur Sanders thing and saying, man, maybe these guys are going to be available and we're going to take one of them. I would not rule it out, but I think it is a concerning element of this draft cycle to monitor. What is not is the final thing that we're going to talk about today before I start diving into all of your questions. Make sure you toss them in the chat. Shout out our super chatter, shout out our members, especially our boy Cody Silva here. Just became a new member because he lost his card. My brother-in-law showed up yesterday, whole wallet gone, didn't know where it was. So, pain's real, man. We all deal with it. Shout out our boy Cody Silva. The Pittsburgh Steelers might be showing their hands at a different position, and it's a surprising position. It's a position that I do not understand, but the more you look into it, the more you kind of feel, all right, there's a justification for it. I think more of a justification for it than going after Jackson Dart and Jalen Milroe. The Steelers have now spent significant time with 2 first-round safeties. That is Malachi Sparks and Nick Emuware. Both of them freak athletes. Both of them expected to go in the first 32 picks. Both of them on the Steelers' radar. The Steelers invited the South Carolina defensive back Nick Emuware to, and I studied that name. I definitely am saying it wrong, but I've studied that name. For the last 12 hours, I've studied how to say that name, and I'm definitely saying it wrong, but I'm going to try. A freak athlete, a dude who runs a 4.3, 6'3", can hit like he is Cam Chancellor, much lesser, but he's got the power of a bruising safety and the speed of any top tier athlete that you want to have. This dude is a freak of nature athletically and is definitely expected to go right around that 21 mark near the end of the first round. Sparks is too. And the Steelers have shown a ton of interest in him. They were all about him at the Georgia Pro Day. I was told that, I mean, there were other names there, but the Pittsburgh Steelers had their eye on the safety, and they wanted him, and they still want him. It's weird. It's a weird situation because you still have Minkah Fitzpatrick for the next 2 years. You still have Deshaun Elliott and Juan Thornhill for the next year. Maybe the Pittsburgh Steelers are thinking long-term here, and they don't see a name like Deshaun Elliott in their future, which, I mean, if you've been watching this show long enough, you know I am very against. You keep Deshaun Elliott for the rest of his career. Unless he goes downhill, there's no chance I'm getting rid of him. Maybe it means that in a year, the Pittsburgh Steelers are not certain that they're going to have Minkah Fitzpatrick anymore. Maybe they're looking at it saying this is a massive year for Minkah to turn things around before we have to force our hand and look in a different direction. That could be a possibility for the Pittsburgh Steelers. And if it is, I can understand where you're going with this. My other thought is that sometimes the Pittsburgh Steelers just need to change course and go best player available. And in this draft, it is very heavy in the top half. You get those first 7-8 picks, there's loaded talent there. There is a ton of stars. The back half of the first round is not the greatest. There are a lot of question marks, especially at positions that the Pittsburgh Steelers are looking at. Obviously, Kenneth Grant, Walter Nolan, Derek Harmon could be there, but we don't know if they're going to be. And if they fall before the Steelers, they're going to have to go a different direction. Matthew Golden, Emeka Ibuka, who knows if they're going to be on the board at 21? And if they are they the best player available? And are the Steelers willing to take them compared to a Jaden Higgins in the third round if for some reason he ends up there, or a different name later that they could get their hands on? I don't know. Are you going quarterback? And if you're not going quarterback, or there are no quarterbacks available and there's nobody else available, what direction are you going in? Well, Malachi Sparks and Nicky Muware are two hell of a name. Both of them are hell of a name to end up at 21 and to be a player that just fits the Steelers defense as a chess piece, that could come in here. In today's NFL, the safety position could pretty much play it all. And the Steelers have, well, a need at slot corner that, I get it, Beanie Bishop and Brandon Echols could fill, but maybe they're thinking, all right, if worst case scenario, we're sitting there at 21, these are two absolute freak athletes that we at least have to consider. These guys are guys with massive upside that we have to look at. Okay, I understand that. In a year, you have decisions to make at safety. Right now, you could use a slot corner, or at least options at a slot corner. And if there's nobody else there and trading back isn't an option, or even if you do trade back and you're thinking both of these guys can be there, or at least one of them, it makes some sense. I see that for the Steelers. That's how I view the situation at safety for Pittsburgh, is not that they are identifying safety as a need right now, but more so that they believe that at the end of the first round, those two guys might be the best two guys on the board, and there could be a gap between them. I mean, they've done that in the past. They did that with TJ Watt. They did that with Cam Hayward was selected 31st. This is what happens. You find those guys that just somehow make their way to the Pittsburgh Steelers, and they say, that's a Steeler. You just have to go get that guy. I think Nicky Muware definitely is, and I think anybody from Georgia's got potential, so you obviously have to consider that. But I view the Pittsburgh Steelers as just making sure that they're doing their due diligence on guys who are going to be there around the end of the first round, who are very good and who might be the best player available in the draft come that 21 mark, or maybe if they trade down a little bit later. Because guys like Kenneth Grant, guys like Walter Nolan, guys like Emeka Ibuka or Omarion Hampton, or any of those names are not guaranteed to be on the board when the Steelers are up. And if that's the case, man, Nicky Muware is a lot better than reaching on another position. Malachi Sparks is a lot better than reaching on another position. And I think the Steelers are aware of that. They're spending some extra time getting to know guys that are going to be there around 21. And I respect it, because sometimes Don't reach. Don't go get another Terrell Edmonds. Don't go get another Artie Burns. Don't go get another Kenny Pickett. Get the best guy that's going to be a star in the NFL. A lot of times that works out best. And I think right now he could fill a need over Beanie Bishop or Brandon Echols if neither of them work out. And in the future, both of them could play safety if the Steelers have tough decisions or make tough decisions on their quarterback room a year from now. That's where the Steelers are at safety. All right. That's everything on my agenda, which means that it's time to start diving into all of your questions. Toss them in the chat if you got them. We'll get to all of them or most of them before we head out of here. Shout out to everybody who is tossing in here that I was on Locked On this morning. Go check that out with my boy Chris Carter. Great episode. Talked a lot of Pittsburgh Steelers NFL draft. We didn't touch on Aaron Rodgers, thankfully. I think all of us are exhausted from the Aaron Rodgers situation, but it was a good time. Toss them in. Shout out our members. Shout out our super chatters. And let's start here. Shout out our boy Cody Silva, who wasn't a member when he asked this question, became a member. What happened to Nick? Is he doing his other job? Yeah, Nick started at Pittsburgh Sportsnet the other day, or I believe he starts at the end of the month, but he made the announcement the other day. He is their head of podcasts over there, which is awesome. I mean, obviously an opportunity you cannot pass up as somebody who's growing in this business. That being said, working out a schedule to figure some stuff out here and to get another face on this podcast, which I'm pumped about. But to be honest with you guys, I'm enjoying talking to you every day, and we're going to continue. What outside noise does Shedeur Sanders come with? Okay, so this is the one question I want to jump on before I start really diving into memberships and that kind of stuff, because I think it's important. This is nothing personal. It's just what I've heard. That there are a number of teams, the Pittsburgh Steelers included, who are well aware that Deion Sanders constantly has cameras in front of him and questions being asked, and people want to ask about Shedeur Sanders, and that's going to come. And the Steelers are not looking for that at all. They do not want. It's not trouble necessarily. It's not issues. It's not drama. It's just noise. And the Steelers want to be a quiet team. The Steelers are a quiet team. They're a very quiet team. That's why when guys like George Pickens blow up and have these major headlines, these negative headlines, the Steelers are immediately asked about it for weeks at a time because there's no noise that surrounds them otherwise. That's what I think the Steelers are worried about with Shedeur is more so what Deion brings, less what Shedeur brings. They're not involving themselves because they don't think he falls. Easy answer. I also don't think Shedeur Sanders falls. I look at Shedeur Sanders as a guy that's going to most likely end up, I want to say, in Vegas. Vegas is my guess with Shedeur Sanders. I think New Orleans is there as well. Both of those are teams that need a quarterback. I've talked to some people in Cleveland, and I don't think that they're super interested in a quarterback at number 2. I think that they love Abdul Carter, and they're having a hard time passing on that, which I understand completely. And when it comes to the Giants, I think they're there, but I do think it depends on if a guy like Travis Hunter is still sitting there and they have an opportunity to grab a defender that they just have a hard time passing up. So I look at both of them as quarterback spots, but I look at Vegas, I look at New Orleans as quarterback spots for sure. Counter argument. Could you see Tomlin saying, I will deal with you as long as I have to, and thinking he can keep Sanders under wraps? Great question. I do think Mike Tomlin could have that conversation. I don't think the concern comes from Mike Tomlin. I don't. The concern probably comes from higher up. Actually, I know the concern comes from higher up. And I'm not going to name names, but there are those within Pittsburgh who are not totally thrilled at the idea. Tomlin is most likely not one of them. Tomlin could care less, dude. You could toss any name in the NFL. If you told him, hey, Tyreek Hill's coming to Pittsburgh, who else is super loud in the NFL? I couldn't even tell you. But if you said, hey, the 3 loudest names in the NFL that come with the most attention are coming to the Steelers, we're going to sign them, Mike Tomlin would be thrilled. He'd be like, hell yeah, dude, those are great players. Those are superstars. He could keep them under wraps. And to be quite honest, he does. He does a pretty good job of it compared to most other teams. So I understand that. I don't think it's Tomlin. And Tomlin gets a really good say. He doesn't get the final say, not always. And some above him might push back on that. That being said, I'm not ruling him out. I definitely can't, nobody could rule him out. I just don't think it's top of their list where we stand right now. We should avoid quarterback in the first round this year. I agree 100%, but I do think that it's on their list. And I'm not a quarterback guy. I think the quarterbacks in this class are not worth taking before the fourth round. There's just no point in it outside of like Jalen Milroe. If you wanted to go second round and make a move there, like a low end move, okay, he's got the upside. Outside of that, fourth round. And to be really honest with you, the only two quarterbacks that I would take in this draft actually are Shedeur Sanders and Jalen Milroe. Those would be the only two that, to me, come with the upside of worth a high-end pick, worth a chance in the outside of Cam Ward, are worth a chance for the Pittsburgh Steelers. But I'm not taking a quarterback in the first round. I'd take Nicky Mawari easy in the first round over a quarterback, and the Steelers have no need for safety, but I just think the upside there is massive compared to the potential risk of a lot of quarterbacks that come in this year's draft class. I think a lot of those guys won't go. They will invite others. They will have to fill the seats. I agree. Milroe and Matthew Golden have both accepted their draft invites, which is brings up a very curious situation. I have not heard anything about Shedeur Sanders or Cam Ward or Abdul Carter or Travis Hunter or any of those big names. We'll see what happens. I still think it's interesting because there are other names that I would have anticipated over Jalen Milroe, and I think that's important here. Is I thought Tyler Shuck would have been a guy that got an invite over Jalen Milroe. I thought we would have heard of Jackson Dart before we heard of Jalen Milroe. Just makes you think. And obviously those are, big names. It's not like Jackson Dart is a low name that wouldn't generate headlines if that news got released. So I think it's interesting how far the NFL jumped. And I think that, hints at teams. I'm not saying the Steelers specifically, but hints at teams, that do have Jalen Milroe as a first round talent. What's the smallest number of quarterbacks you've seen taken in the first round, and what's the you see taken in the first round, and what's the largest? The smallest number I see is 3, which is Cam Ward, Shedeur Sanders, and Jackson Dart, and that would mean most likely the Raiders, the Giants, the Browns, the Steelers, the Saints, all but 2 of them skip on a quarterback in the first round and go into the second round. The largest number I could see 5, which is Cam Ward, Shedeur Sanders, Jackson Dart, Jalen Milroe, Tyler Shuck. I think all of those guys could end up in the first round. I'm not gonna look at. I've heard rumbles of Quinn Ewers, and I am the pullback from me, the gasp that came out of my mouth when I heard that was, whoa, all right. I am terrible at this scouting thing and I should never, ever be involved in it, or somebody's making a massive mistake on this one, because that is wild to me. Wild. But there's a lot of talk about Quinn Ewers under the table. And I'm going to realistically say 5 as my most I could see going in the first round. Unlimited Moonballs. Shout out to everybody, by the way. Happy Monday, Noah. Happy Monday, y'all. First order of business as a new member. We need to solidify a nickname for our wide receiver duo. So far, I've seen Weapons of Past Destruction, Bash Brothers, and Crash Out Kids. I kind of love Crash Out Kids, to be honest with you. The Bash Brothers are awesome. I love the Bash Brothers. I think that's real Pittsburgh. You know what I mean? Get them where, right in the mouth there. Crash Out Kids is really good too, though. I think the Crash Out Kids is a real good one. I would, if I had to list this in order, I'd go Bash Brothers, Crash Out Kids. I think those two are the best we could get. Weapons of Past Destruction is also fantastic. I think that's once you get a quarterback and then you include Pat Freiermuth in that situation, maybe a Kenneth Gainwell if it works out. Now you're looking at the Weapons of Past Destruction. That's the new, greatest show on turf. That's the Steelers' offensive nickname. But I like Bash Brothers. Bash Brothers just fits DK and George. So, I mean, come on, dude. George off the top rope with the Bash Brothers. Come on. I love that. I absolutely love that. Shout out our boy Broderick Wallace here. Joined semi-late. Did I miss announcement for next man in the corner? No, not yet. Still working on it. I had a couple interviews over the weekend. Shout out to everybody who I spoke to, everybody who's also been sending in resumes. Super pumped about it. I will say that I have 2 rotational guests that I am very excited to start bringing on here. Both of them are my right-hand mans at si.com/NFL/Steelers. Plenty of Pittsburgh knowledge. Super excited to get them on the show. Kind of working all that out later this afternoon. We're getting there. But for right now, pumped to talk to you guys. And being back in the studio, whole new environment than iguanas, snakes, and dogs barking all around me. We're cool, calm, and collected here in the city of Pittsburgh. Egyptian Roughneck. I have shout out member for 2 months. We're getting there, guys. Wild how long we're getting there. Shout out to all our members. Appreciate you guys as always. I have faith in Mason. Big takeaway from him and Pickett is Mason doesn't panic in the pocket if the pocket breaks. And if you need a new partner in the corner, I'm free. Appreciate you and everybody else who has reached out over the last week to let me know that they have some interest. I'm sifting through. If anybody who emails me a resume, I check out, certainly. No doubt about it. So don't think that I'm ever ignoring you. I'm always checking you out. My thing with Mason, I like Mason, and I think Mason's got, I guess, untapped potential is the word. He's 29 years old, so I don't know how much is there. I do think Mason is a guy that if the offense works well around him, he could work well within that offense, and I don't mind that. I look at Mason as a guy that if you could develop an offense, and I said this on Friday when talking about Arthur Smith's offense, if you can develop an offense where Mason Rudolph's reads are easier than you expect them to be, it's a breeze for Mason Rudolph. That guy's got all of the arm talent that you're looking for. It's just the mentals that you need to adjust with Mason Rudolph. It's understanding your read concepts and understanding, who's going to be open because of so on and so forth. I used to call him check down king because he would work through his progression so quickly that he'd have to get to the check down and he'd just give up. I think if you could develop an offense that works for him, Mason's got potential to win some games. I do. I mean, I'm not a Kenny Pickett guy. I've never been a Kenny Pickett guy. I think I wish Kenny nothing but the best of luck in the NFL, but I always thought Kenny Pickett could not process a play quick enough to get out of trouble, and he panicked the second that there were trouble, just like you said. When it comes to others like Mason Rudolph, even like Russ last year, or even Justin, processed a play very slowly, but there was never a sense of panic. It was like, okay, I could get out of here if needed. Kenny had the turn to the left. There it is, plays over. And Mason doesn't bring that, which I'm all about. Also, 4th round. So maybe Dillon Gabriel. Shout out Pittsburgh Hornets. I don't mind Dillon Gabriel. My only issue with Dillon Gabriel, man, is how short he is. He is so small. And I think that's an issue. Like, I know people try not to make a big deal out of it, but I spoke to I remember one time talking to a wide receiver in Pittsburgh last year and saying like, hey, what's the difference between Justin and Russ? And he said the difference is that when Russ threw the football, he had no idea the football was coming out of his hands. He just saw it come in the air. That's all it was, because you couldn't see him behind the offensive line. I think it goes both ways. Size is concerning. I think Dillon Gabriel's got a ton of athleticism and he's got decent arm strength for what he did at Oregon, and he's a winner. But I think the size is a massive concern for me. Eddie the First. Noah, Cam has a huge platform to voice his opinion on the quarterback situation, but as someone who has access to the whole team, has TJ expressed his opinion on the topic? Not that I'm aware of. TJ doesn't strike me as that guy, never has. He's do my thing, stick with what I got, do what I need to do, and move on. Do my job, do what's best for the team, but don't get involved in the stuff that isn't my job, my payroll, or my pay scale, whatever. I do not get the sense that he did that. I don't know for certain, obviously, but I don't get the sense that TJ would do that. Cam obviously has the platform, and the older he gets, I mean, look at Cam at this point is like so embedded in the Pittsburgh Steelers that he is allowed to voice those opinions. Not saying TJ is not, but Cam is, I wouldn't be shocked if Cam left and then joined like the scouting department or something in that neighborhood, like became part of the team in that realm. For TJ, I think he's just so focused right now on figuring out how last season ended and how he could fix it that he's not really concerned about anything else. I also think that when it comes to the quarterback situation, a lot of people in Pittsburgh are still thinking Aaron. I think a lot of people have like kind of forgotten that Aaron Rodgers hasn't signed with the Steelers, and they might be thinking around going, are you sure Aaron's not on the team? Are we positive about that? And I think TJ might be honestly one of those guys. Marlon Lewis, if the Steelers choose Milroe in the first, the scouting department would be on the hot seat. Yeah, I agree. I agree. Look, I'm not Jalen Milroe in the first material. I never have been. I do not. I think that guy's got a ton of upside. I just, wild. But the tea leaves are there. And it's wild that the tea leaves, again, this is not me. This is just reading the situation. Reading the situation is concerning. We've had too many first round duds under Mike Tomlin. I agree with that. I think Kevin Colbert at the end had a couple of rough drafts. You know, I think before that it was hit. And right at the end there, it got real bad. And I think I blame Colbert a little bit more than Tomlin in those situations because immediately after that was it. And I don't blame Kenny on either of them. I think Kenny was a Rooney pick because they passed on Dan Marino and everybody overreacted. And it's not great, but I look at it like that. That being said, you know, reaching for Terrell Edmonds, reaching for Artie Burns, you got to wonder whose decision that was because those ones were bad. Did they take Caleb Johnson out for dinner? I heard the visit with the Steelers. I heard he visited with the Steelers last week. Shout out No Coast Golf. I do not know if he went out to dinner. He was in the building on Friday for a pre-draft visit. I think they like Caleb Johnson. Caleb Johnson, to me, sits right in that realm of Quinshon Judkins, Trey Henderson, right in that second, third round area where the Pittsburgh Steelers could be looking for a running back. I think that's the sweet spot for them is that second, third round spot. I know they don't have a second round pick, but that second, third round is where the best running backs, in my opinion, are in this draft class. You could go. I love Omarion Hampton. I love Ashton Genty, obviously, but I'm not a first round running back taker. So I look at the second, third round as like that. Ooh, look at, you're not giving up too much value for these guys. And there are some options there that are good. They like Caleb Johnson. They like Caleb Johnson's power. He met with them at the combine. I'm not positive they ended up at Iowa's Pro Day, but I would imagine somebody was at Iowa's Pro Day. I got a hard time believing that they sent nobody out there with the number of guys that are coming into the draft every year out of Iowa. I would put Caleb Johnson on their list. I don't know if they took him out to dinner. I have not heard anything, which in my head would make me think they did not. Shout out Maddie once again for becoming a new YouTube member. Appreciate you, Maddie, as always. All right. Oh, I got lost in my spot here. Don't worry. We're catching up. Pittsburgh Hornets. What odds would you put on Rodgers announcing during Big Night Out with Pat McAfee? Ooh, I don't know. That's a tough one. That's a very tough one, to be honest. I've heard rumors. I heard a lot of rumors at the league meeting about Rodgers and when he's going to make this announcement. And I'll say this. I don't know if he's going to. I think it's ridiculous if he does. I think it just adds to the cherry on top of how ridiculous the situation has become and how dramatic and showboaty the situation has become. And that would just be the cream of the crop of like, oh gosh, he really did that, huh? Really, really did that. And I don't know. I'm not going to rule it out. I think it's ridiculous if he does. Like, so concerning if he does. So concerning. Y'all want making to make splash plays when teams avoid him. LOL. Listen to what every quarterback says, but y'all think Trayvon was better than Surtain. I don't think either of these. I don't know if it was to a comment in the chat, but I look at Minkah as a guy that, to me, Minkah needs to do more. And Minka is all over the field, and Minka plays best when he's all over the field, but you're paying Minka to make plays, not to just be a shutdown guy. And to be honest, Minka is not a shutdown guy near the end of last season. He definitely let his fair share of plays go. And I don't think Minka was the guy out of place. I think there are differences in that. Like I tried to catch some clarity on the whole like calling guys out situation from guys at the end of last season and who wasn't in place. And what I gathered was the defense does not care at all if Minka goes and does something crazy, because if Minka gets beat, that's okay, because Minka read that correctly. If somebody else does, they weren't pleased with it. So it wasn't on Minka. Look, at Minka's not going to, in my eyes, Minka's just a part of the Steelers and they view him that way. But I can't sit here and say that a year from now, when cap is a little tighter and there's guys that need to be signed and DK Metcalf's cap hit is nearly $40 million, that they're not going to have conversations about it. I can't. Egyptian Roughneck, I have faith. Oh, excuse me. Working through them. Whenever I switched over, it just went right away. Question. Shout out Macaroni Salad. Shout out Macaroni Salad. Question. Harmon, Nolan, and Grant available at 21. Who you got? I'll rank them in order. I'm going Kenneth Grant as my first option for the Pittsburgh Steelers. I think immediately he solves their running game, which has been an issue. Everybody overlooks it. Everybody every offseason seems to forget and start to talk about, hey, they need good pass rushers. Hey, Kenneth Grant's one-sided. No, I think Kenneth Grant has a ton of pass rush potential, but also needs to start as a nose tackle who could transition into a 3 technique and be a member within the running game. And that's how I view him. I think he's the perfect fit for the Steelers and what they're trying to do this offseason. Walter Nolan's number 2 on my list, but I think Derek Harmon is number 2 on the Steelers list because Nolan did nothing at the combine and the pro day. It did not sit well with a lot of teams, and I don't think he's as high on a lot of people's boards as he once was. It would not surprise me if I'm wrong here and things changed over the last month, but the conversation is not the greatest about him not doing anything. Derek Harmon, in my eyes, has all the potential as the rest of them, isn't as flashy right now, but is a big body who has all the physical traits and you can develop. So I'm a big Derek Harmon guy. I would put him 3rd. I think the Steelers might have him 2nd. Kenneth Grant, easily number 1 on my list. Shout out Eddie the First. Shout out to Julio Jones, who would have loved to see him in the black and gold. Solid career. Yeah, shout out to Julio Jones for real. Shout out to Eddie the First for being our first member ever and being here for 2 months. Appreciate you as always. I look at it and say, with Julio Jones in Pittsburgh, with AB, I'll even say that. I'm a big Julio guy. AB was a better wide receiver. Controversial take, maybe. Was all about it. I loved Julio. I actually got to meet Julio one time. He was chilling with Allen Robinson at just like a bar and went up, had to say hello, obviously, as I do with most celebrities that I do not know or most players that I do not know. Obviously knew A-Rob at the time, and Julio was the man, dude, but he's massive. Like, he's a scary looking dude. All right, start bench cut, Nick, Noah, and Chris Carter. Oh, man, I'm starting Chris. Chris is the OG, man. He helped me get started in this situation. So shout out our boy Chris. I'm benching Nick. I'm cutting Noah. Sorry, dude. Couldn't do it to myself. Shout out our boy Nick. Miss him all the time, but he's doing well. Shout out Maddie. Can you explain the cap hit? I'm still highly confused how that works. It depends on the player. Every player's different. I'd need like specific examples of a guy to kind of help break it down. With DK Metcalf, they made most of it a signing bonus in this year, and then a lot of it a signing bonus next year. So therefore, or a roster bonus next year. So therefore, the cap hit isn't too significant. When it comes to him this season, I believe I don't know the exact number, but it was like $13 million, something in that neighborhood. When it comes to a guy like TJ Watt, here's a good example. They're going to extend him. His contract will be worth roughly $40 million a year starting next year. This year, his contract is worth 32, I believe, 35, somewhere in that neighborhood. Once you extend him, you're going to add a signing bonus. That signing bonus is essentially going to become this year's salary, which means that his cap hit goes from like 35 to maybe like 20. And in that ballpark, because signing bonuses do not count towards the cap, or at least not all of it counts towards the cap. It gets a little confusing, but as long as you could convert anything into a signing bonus and lower the cap hit, that's where a lot of teams get out of trouble. And at the same time, you could add void years, which teams don't like to do very often. But it does. It just stretched out. Ben was a big void year guy. He had like 4 void years at the end of his contract, which meant that the Steelers were paying him for like 4 years after he retired. It wasn't much money, but it was just small dead hits every year. A new nickname for the wide receivers: blue collar bullies. I like blue collar bullies. I'm a big fan of the blue collar bullies. Now, here's the thing, is I don't think DK Metcalf, George Pickens, I don't know how blue collar they are. You know, they're Pittsburgh Steelers. They're Bash Bros, man. They're Bash Bros. And blue collar bullies, I think, also fits. Dude, you want to know what I would love? I would love for the Steelers to draft a running back and for us to be able to call Jalen Warren and whoever that running back is, the blue collar bullies, and then the Bash Bros at wide receiver. And then the whole offense as a whole is the weapons of pass destruction. I think that's fantastic. I think we've come up with the trifecta here. I'm a big fan. Hey, shout out our girl Maddie here. Yeah, I had to renew my membership because I just got my own place. That's awesome. Congratulations. Hope the move's smooth. Nothing worse than moving. Nothing more exciting than moving at the same time. Shout out Maddie, dude. That's incredible, actually. Dart over Milroe, she follows with. I agree with this. When it comes to the floor. When it comes to the ceiling, I think Milroe's got a bigger ceiling. But look, when I'm wrong, Maddie is the one that we go to say that she was right the whole time. That's clear as day, is that Maddie is the one who's called Jackson Dart from the beginning. And if we are all wrong on it, well, we got to look back at her. Jack Jones has been released by the Raiders. Would he fit for the Steelers? Yeah, I think so. And I appreciate you bringing him up. I actually had him on my list to talk about today and brushed by it. So I did not mean to do that. When it comes to Jack Jones, I like Jack Jones. 3 interceptions last year. His career has given up like 60% of his passes attended to him. I think he's a good young corner who's got a lot of athleticism. When he gets the ball in his hands, he can actually do something with it, which is exciting. He's only 27 years old. I think the Steelers could bring him in if he's super cheap and look at him as an option that can grow behind Darius Slay, potentially compete with Corey Trice for playing time. I don't know if he's much more than that. You know, Darius Slay's the starter. The Steelers have a liking for Corey Trice. I don't know how long they're going to hold on to that liking because of the injury issues. Things could change, obviously, and I could look at Jack Jones as a guy that could be the future, but I think they're going to draft somebody who they're going to think is the future next year. Maybe this year, but next year. And he's going to replace Darius Slay. They want to go young at that position. I like that. I think he's a better – look, if Jack Jones became available before they signed Darius Slay, I'd be pushing and making an argument for Jack Jones. Today, I think it's a little complicated. I don't think it's likely, but I do think that he's got a connection with Gerald Alexander, and he could be on their radar. Potato salad. Favorite flavors of Ruffles, Doritos, or Pringles? Ruffles, easily the sour cream and cheddar. Easy. Doritos, I'm a Cool Ranch guy. Keep it classic. I only say that because I don't buy Doritos, because if you put me in front of a bag of Doritos, it's gone. There's there's nothing left at the end of that day. So I'm going Cool Ranch, Doritos. Pringles, man. I think Pringles I like to kind of get crazy with sometimes. You know, I like the pizza Pringles. Obviously the sour cream and onion, the salt and vinegar Pringles slap. Pringles isn't on my mind most times, but you like show up back home for Christmas or something and your mom for some reason, my mom does it all the time. You know what I mean? I get like the random gift of food that I'm like this year was a big thing of cheese balls. And I'm like, that's awesome, dude. But I am 29 and my metabolism cannot be doing cheese balls these days. That's somebody gets me some Pringles. I'm all about it. I'm super pumped. Cam Sutton still in the building. Are we signing him? He was in the building during the introductory press conferences for the first round of free agents. I thought it was very interesting. I don't know what came of it, if anything came of it, but I would not be surprised if Cam Sutton does end up back in Pittsburgh is a guy. I thought it was very interesting that at the same day they were announcing two corners, he was walking around decked out in Steelers gear. So I don't know. I wish I had an answer to that one. I thought it was very interesting that he was there. I think everybody else thought it was very interesting that he was there. Haven't heard a single thing since. Won't lie to you, though. I was at the league meetings and I did not ask to bring it up simply because there were two bigger topics of conversation. And until you asked me this question, I kind of blanked on it. I'll do a little bit of digging. Right now, where we stand, though, nothing new. Interesting for sure. Still working through all of these, making sure I don't miss any, obviously. Fans of the Crash Out Kids, Crash Out Corp. I kind of like Crash Out Corp. I like Crash Out Kids too. I just like the Crash Out. The Crash Out part of this is a big one. Oh, Crash Money Records. Hollywood 913. You might be getting a t-shirt, my man. You might be getting a t-shirt. Oh, that's a good time right there. That's awesome. That's a good one for sure. Shout out to, we might have to drop a poll where we do some voting, excuse me, sorry, blanked on that word, on how we're going about this wide receiver duo. Shout out to Robert here. Hey, Noah, keep up the good work. Love your show. Appreciate you, my guy. Appreciate everybody. Pittsburgh Hornets. Do you think the Bengals are going to move? If they do, what does that mean for the North? Nothing. Like change locations, move in the. I don't think it's going to happen. Cincinnati is going to pay them. You know what I mean? Like that's what's gonna happen there. It always happens. We go through the same cycle all the time where it goes from like, oh, this team's gonna leave. All right, never mind. The city chalked up the money. Like that's what happens all the time. I don't think the Bengals are gonna leave. Even if they did, they'd keep them in there. It gets very complicated to move divisions. It gets incredibly complicated just to move one team because then you'd have to move others. And there are already like the NFC East. Dallas, come on. Dallas is not East. It's not even close to East. So they do that all the time. I wouldn't be worried about it. I don't know where else Cincy would even go, and it doesn't change anything for the AFC North. I don't think they're going to move, though. All right, going to answer a couple more here before we head out of here for a second. The Steel City Wreckers. I like that one, too. Oh, I'm not answering most overrated Steeler. Can't be doing that, guys. We're too close to the season, man. Too close to the season. Nacho cheese is meta. Your taste buds are lying to you. Sour cream and cheddar is goated pick, though. Shout out. Nacho cheese. Look, I'm not complaining. I'm not picking favorites between Cool Ranch and nacho cheese. Anything in front of me, I'm eating, man. I'm a Doritos guy. Even if you give me the sweet chili or whatever, I'm all about it. I'm not complaining. All right. What do I think about Jade Barron, going 21? I like him. I was nervous about his speed at the NFL Combine. I thought he did better than I anticipated with the drills and everything. I look at him as a good end of the first round pick, but I don't think the Steelers are that interested in corner. I don't. And they went to Texas, but for some reason they keep highlighting that they talked to Quinn Ewers at Texas. So I don't think that they showed a bunch of interest in him there. They like him, you know, they like him. They like Ben Morrison. They obviously like Will Johnson out of Michigan, but I'm not super sold on them going in with the corner in the first round. And I I don't think that's going to change where we sit here currently. Is Alfred Collins a reach in the first? Yeah, I think so. Pretty big one. I like Alfred Collins. I think he's 6th on my 7th, maybe on my big board in defensive tackles. I would go my top 7, we'll give you, are Kenneth Grant, outside of Mason Graham, Kenneth Grant, Walter Nolan, Derek Harmon, Darius Alexander. I think it's TJ Sanders for me, and then I think it's Alfred Collins. That's how I guess that's 6. Alfred Collins. I think that's my top 6 there. I think reaching for Collins at 21 is a little bit big. All righty. Just making sure I didn't miss anything before we head out of here. All right. Shout out Grayson the Ginger here. Hey, Noah, do you still think Joey Porter Jr. has potential to be a top 5 corner in the league? Definitely. I look at sophomore slumps and say they happen all the time. They never really concern me when it comes to a second-year guy. Now, a third-year guy, that's a slump. That's a real, you are going backwards. This is not good. You have to crawl out of it. A lot of people do. And I look at Joey Porter as a guy who's had great mentors, had maybe a little bit too much on his plate last year, is going to take a step back there, and I think it works out for him. I do. I'm not super worried about Joey Porter where we stand currently. This year, it means a lot. You got to have a good year, but I anticipate him having one. Don Fry, if Rodgers comes, do you think George Pickens plays out his contract, or do you think they use the money from Rodgers to sign GP if he doesn't come? I don't know where they stand with the George Pickens contract. It's, to me, I went into the league meetings fairly certain George Pickens was going to leave Pittsburgh this offseason. I left them thinking George Pickens was going to stay at least one more year, and they were going to try to make it work with him and DK Metcalf. And I have not been able, I mean, that opinion won't change because it was only a week ago. It sure sounds like Omar Khan and Mike Tomlin want George Pickens around. What if that's true? If they've had any negotiations yet, I do not know. I know at one point they were looking to move on from him. They were ready for somebody to make an offer, but time heals all wounds. And right now where we stand, I think George is more likely to be here than he's not, which is surprising to me, I will admit. I don't know about a contract. I don't know. I don't know where they go there. If they have a conversation with them saying, you have to stick it out 1 year and then we'll figure it out next year. Or if they say, we are going to sign you, but maybe to a lower end deal. I think George's best bet is to wait a year from now and to get his contract next year, because it'll be 1 year probably with the best quarterback that he's played with so far and more help at wide receiver. I think he's going to be open all the time. I think the upside of George in 2025 with DK and Aaron Rodgers is huge. But I also understand that players want to get paid and they want guaranteed money, and I don't blame them for that one. So I don't know how that's going to work out, but I do think that where we stand right now, I'm leaning towards the side of George Pickens being here in 2025. All right, we'll finish it off with this one. Would you trade back to the late first/second if Sanders Dart is there, or would you trade back and take Grant? Look at if 2 quarterbacks are there and you're able to trade back to, 30, we'll say. We'll just pick a random number. I don't even know who picks 30. And you're choosing between 2 quarterbacks and Kenneth Grant. I still think I'm going personally Kenneth Grant. I don't know if the Steelers would think that way, but I personally would go with Kenneth Grant. I think Kenneth Grant is a monster. I think he's got so much upside. I think he comes from the perfect defense. I look at Kenneth Grant as a guy that's got, top 15 potential, and I'm taking that, and I'm feeling really good about that situation. If you could get another Cam Hayward and then save your quarterback situation for next year where it's better options, I don't know how you pass that up. I really, really don't. All right, we'll finish it off with Grayson Ginger here. I got one more for you, Noah. Have you seen Desmond Watson? And do you think Steelers should take a chance on him? Yeah, I love every time somebody brings up Desmond Watson. I think he's an absolute rock star. I don't want to say stud, rock star. Anybody who's 420 pounds and can play football, man, God bless. You're doing big things, especially for a big man. So I don't think that the Steelers look at him I do think that if he goes undrafted, there's a possibility. Why not? Why wouldn't you? I think a lot of teams would feel that same way. I don't know how a 400-pound player works in the NFL, but I do know that the Steelers had a lot of issues with the guy named Vince Wilfork, who was not a small human being. I don't know if he was 400 pounds, but damn, he had to be close. And I'm all about Desmond. I'm all about Desmond Watson. Love that guy. And if he ends up in Pittsburgh, I will be pumped about it. I also think that's the one situation where they should give number one away, because that would be incredible. I don't know if he's on their radar. I don't have any idea, but I think it would be awesome if he went undrafted and ended up in Pittsburgh. All right. With that said, guys, we are heading out of here. Thank you so much for jumping on to another episode of All Steelers Talk. Make sure to subscribe to us on YouTube, youtube.com/All Steelers Talk. Check us out anywhere you get your audio podcasts. We are really pushing those audio downloads, trying to get that 5-star rating on Apple. So hit us up anywhere you get your podcasts, and find all of my work at si.com/NFL/Steelers. I will be back tomorrow afternoon, hopefully, with more updates involving the Pittsburgh Steelers, anything that isn't Aaron Rodgers, but maybe a signing from Aaron Rodgers. With that said, enjoy another beautiful day in the Berg. Peace.